What if everything you've been calling reality is nothing more than a shadow, a reflection of old beliefs that no longer serve you? And what if the key to transforming your life isn't out there in the world of facts, but inside, hidden in the imagination you've been taught to dismiss since childhood? Have you ever felt trapped by what your eyes show you? An empty bank account, a doctor's diagnosis, or a closed door that feels like the end of the road? Most people believe these so-called facts define who they are. But here's the paradox. What you call reality is not the cause of your life. It's the effect. The mirror never decides what it reflects. You do. And that's why Neville Goddard's teaching is so radical. If the outer world is only a shadow, then the true creative power lies in the inner world. Imagination, your own wonderful human imagination, is not a game. It is God in action, the force that shapes circumstances and bends facts to fit the state you persist in. Ignore the evidence of the senses, and you'll discover the secret most people never dare to test. Reality changes when you do. Since childhood, people are trained to trust what their five senses tell them. The eyes point to an empty wallet, the ears catch words of doubt, the skin feels the chill of lack, and the taste of bitterness lingers. Reality, as dictated by the senses, seems undeniable. Yet this outer world, so vivid and solid, can become a prison if one bows to it blindly. Think about it. How many times has someone said seeing is believing? It sounds logical, but it hides a trap. If you only believe after your senses present proof, you are stuck waiting forever. You become a servant of appearances, bound to circumstances instead of mastering them. The world of Caesar loves when you play by those rules. The senses are persuasive storytellers, but they don't hold the final word. They echo shadows, reflections of what has already been impressed upon the inner world of consciousness. When you assume they are the source of truth, you give away your power. And isn't it interesting how often those facts change overnight? Imagine a doctor's diagnosis. The paper looks official, the voice sounds certain. Yet history is full of people who defied such verdicts by holding a stronger assumption in imagination. They saw themselves fulfilled in health, even when the evidence screamed otherwise. The five senses were loud, but their inner conviction was louder. The danger lies not in having senses, but in worshipping them as gods. They seduce you into thinking they define identity. If your bank account balance is low, they whisper, "This is who you are." But is it really? Or is it just today's shadow? A temporary reflection waiting to be replaced by a new assumption? The world of Caesar, as Neville called it, is built entirely on these outward signs. It's a stage set, painted with sounds, smells, and textures. If you mistake the stage for reality itself, you remain a powerless actor. But once you realize the stage is shaped by your inner imagination, you reclaim your creative power. Think of it like watching the news. The screen shows crisis, fear, and limitation. If you assume it's the final truth, your feelings follow. Anxiety grows, belief shrinks, and desire fades into despair. But if you remember it's just one reflection, just a broadcast of the current assumption, you stop reacting and start creating. Many people live enslaved by the five senses without noticing. They hear no, so they stop trying. They see obstacles, so they give up. They feel the sting of rejection, so they assume unworthiness. Yet all of these are shadows, fleeting reflections of old assumptions. Shadows only exist because light is behind them. That light is imagination, the God in action within. But before diving into its depth, it's crucial to strip away the tyranny of the senses. When you stop bowing to them, you stop reacting to every gust of outer wind. You begin to understand, attention is sacred, and where you place it determines your world. So the question becomes, will you keep worshipping the five false gods of sight, sound, touch, taste, and smell? Or will you dare to look beyond, toward the inner world that actually shapes reality? Because only when you recognize their limitation can you take the next step, seeing reality for what it truly is, a mirror. Imagine standing in front of a mirror. If you frown, the reflection frowns back. If you smile, it smiles too. No one would try to fix the reflection by smearing makeup on the glass. It would be absurd. Yet that's exactly what people do when they try to change their outer world without first changing their inner state. Reality is nothing more than a mirror, reflecting the beliefs and assumptions held within consciousness. It cannot create, it only reveals. If the reflection displeases you, the solution is not to smash the mirror, but to transform the source. The inner world is always the cause, the outer world always the effect. Think of the shadows at sunset. They stretch long and distorted across the ground. The shadow itself is powerless. It merely reports the presence of light and form. Outer conditions are the same. They are shadows of identity, reflections of the assumptions you've been nurturing in silence. When you understand this, frustration with circumstances begins to dissolve. You stop blaming the world of Caesar for lack, failure, or rejection. Instead, you realize, this outer scene is the echo of my own inner dialogue. That awareness shifts the seat of power back to imagination, where true creation happens. Many people waste years trying to wrestle with reflections. They hustle harder, push circumstances, fight resistance. But it's like arguing with the image in the mirror. It never works. Real change happens when you adjust conviction, when you assume the state of fulfillment inside. Then the mirror has no choice but to obey. Think of someone who constantly worries about money. Their belief in scarcity creates an inner world of fear. That fear projects outward as bills piling up, unexpected expenses, bad luck. The mirror isn't cruel, it's just faithful. It reflects what's already assumed to be true. Change the assumption, and the reflection changes too. The beauty of this law is that it works with perfect precision. Even persistence in doubt will bear fruit, but fruit you don't want. Seeds of belief, whether in abundance or lack, gestate and eventually give birth. Reality has no power of its own. It is always reporting what has been conceived in imagination. Understanding reality as a mirror frees you from despair. Suddenly, setbacks lose their sting. You recognize them as echoes of old states, not predictions of the future. Instead of reacting with fear, you quietly shift attention to the assumption of the wish fulfilled. That shift plants a new seed for tomorrow's reflection. Have you ever noticed how when you feel confident, the world seems to cooperate? Strangers smile, opportunities open, life flows. And when you feel defeated, everything appears to resist you. That's the mirror in action. It's not random, it's the law of consciousness, faithfully echoing your inner state. Once you grasp this, life becomes less about reacting and more about assuming. The mirror can't be blamed or praised, it's neutral, obedient, automatic. The real question is, what reflection are you willing to see? And to answer that, we must turn to the source itself, the imagination, the true creative power. Most people think of imagination as child's play, something left behind with crayons and fairy tales. But in truth, imagination is not a fantasy. It is the deepest creative power in existence. Every building, every book, every invention began as an image in someone's inner world before it appeared in the outer world. Consider this. The phone in your hand didn't just appear on an assembly line. First, it existed vividly in someone's mind. They felt its weight, imagined its functions, saw its design before the first prototype was built. The five senses only confirmed later what imagination had already conceived. Imagination is God in action. It is the creative spirit moving through identity, shaping reality according to assumption and belief. When a person holds a conviction long enough, the outer world bends to it. The so-called facts of Caesar eventually yield to the unseen persistence of inner vision. The power of imagination is subtle, yet unstoppable. Think of a seed buried underground. You don't see its growth, but something is happening. In the same way, every imaginal scene planted in the state akin to sleep carries within it the law of gestation and birth. Reality is only the harvest. Many dismiss imagination because they confuse it with daydreaming, but the difference lies in conviction. A daydream is casual and fleeting. An imaginal act, charged with belief and feeling, is a decree. It is an assumption of the wish fulfilled that persists until it feels natural, and then the mirror of life reflects it. History is filled with examples of imagination reshaping reality. Great leaders envisioned freedom before it was fact. Scientists saw solutions long before experiments proved them. Artists lived in the end of their creations, letting scenes unfold in vivid detail within consciousness until the world caught up. On a personal level, think about the times you rehearsed conversations in your mind. You felt the words, saw the faces, heard the tones, and often, when the real conversation happened, it unfolded exactly as imagined. Coincidence? Or proof that imagination silently scripts the outer play? The secret is to treat imagination as more real than the senses. The outer world is the shadow, the reflection. The inner world is the light casting it. When you live more in imagination than in appearances, you tap into creative power that has no rival. You become the author, not the audience. Some resist this truth because it feels too simple. Could imagining really be the law behind wealth, healing, love, and fulfillment? Yes, because consciousness is cause. The apartment story you'll hear later is not an exception, but a demonstration of how imagination, applied with persistence, makes the impossible natural. Once you embrace imagination as the true creative power, life stops feeling random. You realize you're not a victim of circumstance, but a participant in divine creation. And when you know this, the next step becomes clear. You must learn to ignore the evidence of the senses when they contradict your inner vision. At first glance, ignoring what your eyes see or ears hear seems foolish. After all, aren't the senses designed to show us reality? But here lies the trap. They only reveal the outer world of Caesar, a mirror of past assumptions. To create something new, you must refuse to be hypnotized by those shadows. Imagine looking at an empty bank account. The numbers glare back, mocking your desire for abundance. If you accept them as final, you strengthen the assumption of lack. But if you ignore them and persist in the feeling of fulfillment, you plant a new seed. The mirror will eventually reflect your inner conviction. Ignoring the senses is not delusion, it's wisdom. Just as a farmer doesn't dig up the soil every day to check on the seed, you don't need to keep measuring progress through outer evidence. You trust the unseen law of gestation, knowing that what is conceived in imagination must one day be born. Think of someone recovering from illness. The body may scream pain, the diagnosis may declare limits. Yet by assuming the identity of health, they shift inner attention. They no longer bow to the shadow but to the creative power within. And slowly, outer conditions begin to echo that inner truth. The world will test your conviction. It will throw facts in your face. Rejection letters, closed doors, unpaid bills. If you react to them, you feed the old state. But if you turn away, mentally living in the end, you water the new assumption. Persistence here is the quiet act of faith. Ignoring the senses is like walking through fog. The path looks uncertain, but you keep moving because you know the destination exists. Each step is guided not by what the eyes confirm, but by what the imagination has already declared as fulfilled. That's how desire becomes reality. Have you ever noticed how children play? A cardboard box becomes a castle. A blanket turns into a cape. They don't need permission from the senses to believe. They live from imagination, and in that moment their world bends to their conviction. Adults call it pretending. Neville called it creation. The key is not to fight appearances, but to quietly dismiss them. You don't argue with the mirror. You shift the inner scene. When a contrary shadow appears, simply label it old news. Attention is too valuable to waste on yesterday's reflection when today's assumption is already shaping tomorrow. This discipline creates a profound peace. You no longer chase evidence, beg for signs, or panic at obstacles. You rest in the knowing that imagination, once assumed with feeling, will inevitably be mirrored. The outer world may take time to rearrange, but the law never fails. And here's the beauty. Once you taste the freedom of ignoring the senses, you no longer live as a servant of appearances. You step into a higher state of identity, where desire is already a fact within. Which leads us naturally to the next secret, learning what it truly means to live in the end. To live in the end is to carry yourself as if your desire were already fulfilled. It's not about waiting, wishing, or hoping. It's about assuming the state of fulfillment here and now. This isn't forced excitement, but quiet conviction, the naturalness of being who you already decided to be within. Imagine a person longing for financial freedom. If they truly lived in the end, they wouldn't check their bank account with fear. They would feel ease, a deep breath of relief, the identity of one who already has enough. That inner world, held consistently, becomes the seed that reality cannot resist reflecting. Living in the end is different from daydreaming. Daydreaming says, one day I'll have it. The end says, I already am it. It is a shift of consciousness, a rebirth of identity. You stop rehearsing the desire as a distant possibility and start embodying the fulfillment as your current state. Think of an actor preparing for a role. They don't merely think about the character, they step into it. Their posture, tone, and emotions align with that assumption. In the same way, living in the end is an inner performance of truth, except this performance is not pretend. It is creation in action. The secret is the feeling. If you already had the relationship, the home, the health, what would you feel right now? Perhaps not wild ecstasy, but a gentle satisfaction, the peace of natural possession. That subtle mood is the heartbeat of living in the end, and once you touch it, you know. Many struggle because they keep slipping into wanting. Wanting implies distance, separation, lack. The mirror then faithfully reflects lack. But thinking from the end, embodying the wish fulfilled creates a different vibration, one that the outer world must echo with fulfillment. The law leaves no room for chance. Living in the end is not ignoring responsibility, it's redefining it. Your true responsibility is to maintain inner conviction, to persist in the assumption even when shadows tempt you back into doubt. Everything else, circumstances, timing, opportunities, flows as natural consequences of the new state. A personal example may help. Imagine someone desiring healing. Instead of constantly noticing pain, they begin to carry the inner attitude of one already restored. They walk a little lighter, breathe a little freer, and smile with quiet gratitude. That state is the end, and in time the body conforms. The beauty of this practice is how ordinary it feels. When a new state truly takes root, it stops feeling special. It feels normal, natural, inevitable. That's when you know the seed is alive, gestating in silence, preparing its birth in the mirror of the world of Caesar. Living in the end changes everything: how you walk, how you speak, how you think of tomorrow. And once you grasp this, the next revelation follows naturally. You are no longer the seeker. You have shifted identity. You have become, in consciousness, the one who already is. One of the greatest secrets in Neville's teaching is this: true transformation happens when identity shifts. As long as you see yourself as the one seeking, you remain in the state of lack. But the moment you assume the identity of the one fulfilled, everything begins to rearrange itself in the mirror of reality. Identity is powerful because it dictates assumption. If you believe you are unlucky, your inner world will color every event through that lens. A missed opportunity becomes proof, a rejection becomes fate. But when you shift to the conviction of being blessed, the same events transform into stepping stones toward fulfillment. Think about common phrases people repeat: "That's just the way I am," or "People like me never get ahead." These statements are not harmless. They are assumptions of identity. They reinforce the shadow of old beliefs, anchoring the person in the same state. To create a new life, a new I am must be embraced. Identity works quietly but persistently. A person who identifies as poor may receive money but somehow loses it quickly. It doesn't match their assumption state. Another who identifies as healthy may bounce back from setbacks faster because the inner belief overrides temporary shadows. The outer world conforms to the inner identity. Shifting identity is not about pretending, it's about embodying. If you assume the state of being loved, you don't beg for attention. You carry yourself differently, more open, more at ease. Others respond in kind, not because you forced it, but because your inner assumptions silently shaped the reflection. Consider the story of the apartment we'll touch on soon. The woman didn't act like a desperate applicant waiting for a chance. She shifted into the identity of the resident. She arranged furniture in her imagination, felt the keys in her palm, and lived as though it were already hers. Identity gave birth to fulfillment. This shift requires persistence, because the old identity will fight for survival. Doubts creep in, but look at the facts. That's when attention must be guarded. Each time you return to the new assumption, you weaken the old state until it fades like a shadow in the light of dawn. The beauty of shifting identity is how natural it eventually feels. At first, it might feel forced, like trying on new clothes that don't quite fit. But with repetition, the feeling grows familiar, then normal. When the new state feels natural, the world of Caesar has no choice but to mirror it. A simple practice is to ask, who am I being right now? Not what am I doing, but who am I assuming myself to be? This question cuts through noise and reveals the state you're carrying. The moment you notice it, you have the power to choose differently. And once identity shifts, desire transforms into fulfillment. You no longer chase the wish, you live it. And this naturally prepares the ground for the next step, learning the practical method, the how-to of moving from imagination into manifestation with discipline and love. By now, the principles are clear. Imagination is the true creative power. The world is a mirror and identity shapes reality. But how do you actually apply this in daily life? Neville gave a practical method, simple, direct, and profoundly effective. It has 4 steps: define, construct, enter, and immerse. Step 1. Define your desire clearly. Vague wishes produce vague results. Wanting money is too broad. What does it represent? Security, freedom, a specific lifestyle. When you define the end, you create a target for attention. Without clarity, imagination has nothing solid to give birth to. Step 2. Construct a short, vivid scene that implies fulfillment. The scene should occur after the desire is already realized. If you want a new job, don't imagine the interview. Imagine a friend shaking your hand and saying, "Congratulations." The scene is not about the process, but the end. Step 3. Enter the state akin to sleep, SATS. This is that drowsy, in-between state just before sleep when the conscious mind quiets down. It's the fertile soil where the seed of assumption can take root. Relax, breathe, and let go of the day. This is the doorway to the inner world. Step 4. Immerse yourself fully in the scene. Don't watch it like a movie, step into it. Feel from the first-person perspective. If it's a new home, touch the walls, feel the keys in your palm, hear the echoes of your own footsteps. Engage all your inner senses until the scene feels natural. The key is not dramatic emotion, but quiet conviction. If you already had the fulfillment, how would it feel? Peaceful, normal, settled. That subtle feeling of naturalness is what impresses the subconscious. You fall asleep in that state, carrying the assumption of the wish fulfilled into deeper consciousness. Think of it as planting a seed. You don't shout at the soil or dig it up every morning. You simply trust the process. In the same way, once the seed is planted in SATS, your job is persistence, watering it daily with attention and belief until the birth comes in the outer world. Many make the mistake of complicating this practice. They imagine long stories, dozens of details, endless variations. But Neville insisted, keep it short, keep it vivid, keep it personal. A single handshake, a single word, a single gesture of fulfillment is enough to carry the power of creation. This method works because it bypasses the resistance of the senses. In that twilight state, the inner world feels more real than the outer, and whatever you accept there with conviction will eventually echo in reality. The mirror can only reflect what has been impressed upon consciousness. Once you begin using this 4-step practice, the results may surprise you, and to see how powerful it truly is, nothing explains it better than real-life application, like the famous apartment story, where persistence in this method turned an impossible situation into natural fulfillment. Stories have a way of making principles come alive, and Neville often shared them to show that this law is practical, not theory. One of the most striking is the story of a woman who desired a specific apartment. To her, it wasn't just walls and windows. It represented peace, security, and a fresh start. Outwardly, every fact denied her wish. The apartment was occupied, the tenant showed no signs of leaving, and logic said it was impossible. The 5 senses screamed no, but instead of bowing to those shadows, she chose to turn inward. She lived in the end, where her desire was already fulfilled. Each night, as she drifted into the state akin to sleep, she constructed her imaginal scene. She didn't see herself hunting for listings or negotiating rent. She saw herself inside the apartment, arranging her own furniture, sipping coffee in her kitchen, holding the keys in her palm with a quiet smile. She made it vivid. The textures of fabrics, the cool feel of the metal keys, the aroma of coffee brewing, all engaged her inner senses. She wasn't watching from a distance. She was living as the resident. This persistence in imagination became her conviction, her new identity in consciousness. By day, she carried the same assumption. She didn't beg, plead, or chase after leads. She simply persisted in the feeling of fulfillment, confident that the inner world was the cause and the outer world only the mirror. Reality had no choice but to conform. Then, seemingly by chance, circumstances shifted. The current tenant suddenly had to relocate, something she could never have predicted or arranged. The apartment became available in a natural sequence of events, as though it were always meant to be hers. What began in imagination became fact in reality. Notice that she didn't fight reality. She didn't waste energy battling the world of Caesar. Instead, she quietly persisted in the assumption of the wish fulfilled. Her inner state gestated like a seed beneath the soil, until birth arrived through a bridge of incidents. What makes this story powerful is how ordinary it looks from the outside. To others, it seemed like coincidence, but she knew the truth. The apartment was conceived in imagination, nourished in SATS, and brought to birth through persistence. This is the law in action. simple and profound. The lesson is clear. The mirror of reality must reflect your assumption. Even when the senses protest, persistence in conviction will eventually make the impossible natural. The outer world bends to the inner world, never the other way around. Her story is a living testimony of that truth, and this brings us to a subtle but crucial distinction in Neville's teaching, one that separates wanting from having, the difference between thinking of the end and thinking from the end. This distinction may seem small, but it changes everything. Thinking of the end means imagining your desire as something far away, something you hope to reach. Thinking from the end means standing in imagination as though it were already fulfilled, looking back at the journey from the finish line. When someone thinks of the end, they usually say, "One day I'll have it." That subtle phrasing implies distance, separation, and lack. The mirror then reflects that lack, keeping the desire always just out of reach. It's the state of wanting, not of having. Thinking from the end shifts identity. Instead of desiring health, you assume the state of being healthy. Instead of wishing for love, you embody the naturalness of already being loved. It is not future tense, it is now. Consciousness creates reality in the present, not in some far-off tomorrow. Imagine a marathon runner. Thinking of the finish line is exhausting. It always seems distant, but thinking from the finish line changes everything. You feel the medal on your chest, the relief in your breath, the applause in your ears. That inner world, once assumed, draws the body forward naturally. In practical terms, this means asking yourself daily, if my desire were already fulfilled, how would I feel right now? The answer reveals the assumption you must carry. Gratitude, relief, ease. These feelings belong to the end. Living in them now is thinking from the end. The apartment story is a perfect example. The woman didn't think of the apartment, longing for it in imagination. She thought from the apartment, walking its rooms, arranging her furniture, smelling her coffee. That assumption became her new identity, and the world of Caesar conformed. Thinking of keeps attention trapped in desire. It is like staring at a seed and lamenting that it hasn't sprouted yet. Thinking from is planting the seed, trusting the law of gestation, and carrying yourself as though the harvest were inevitable. The difference is subtle but absolute. Many struggle here because the senses scream contradiction. They think, how can I feel wealthy when I see bills? But that's the very point. Ignoring the shadow and giving full loyalty to imagination. When you think from, the feeling of fulfillment becomes the seed, and persistence waters it daily. This practice rewires the mind. Soon the assumption of the wish fulfilled feels normal, natural, effortless. And when it feels natural, the outer world must reflect it. Thinking from the end transforms desire into reality by aligning identity with fulfillment. And when this shift becomes your habit, persistence is no longer struggle but joy. You no longer chase results, you rest in natural conviction. And this leads us to the final key of Neville's teaching, the quiet power of persistence and naturalness. If imagination is the seed, persistence is the watering. One night of imagining may plant the desire, but it is the steady return to the assumption of the wish fulfilled that brings birth. Persistence does not mean straining or forcing. It means gently, repeatedly, choosing the inner world over the outer shadows. Think of brushing your teeth. You don't do it once and expect lifelong results. It's a daily practice, natural and effortless, because it has become identity. In the same way, persisting in the new assumption means carrying the inner attitude day after day until it feels as ordinary as breathing. At first, it may feel artificial. You assume wealth while the bank account still shows lack. You assume health while the body still aches. Yet each return to the state strengthens conviction until one day the assumption feels natural. That naturalness is the signal that birth is near. Neville often said the outer world is old news. What you see now is just a reflection of past assumptions. Persistence means refusing to be hypnotized by yesterday's shadows and returning again to today's identity. The mirror must eventually catch up with the light that now casts it. Consider a gardener. Seeds don't sprout overnight, but the gardener doesn't panic. They water, they wait, they trust the law. Persistence in imagination is the same. You may not see immediate results, but the law of gestation is always at work beneath the surface of consciousness. Naturalness is the true mark of success. When the state feels so normal that you no longer crave proof, the outer reflection is inevitable. You've shifted identity fully. You've moved from effort to ease, from forcing to simply being. And that's when fulfillment shows up almost unnoticed. Many quit too soon. They plant the seed, water it once or twice, then abandon it because the soil looks unchanged. But persistence is the quiet conviction that what is real in imagination must appear. It is faith in action, the steady attention to the unseen reality. A simple practice is to label contrary evidence as old. Bills arrive, old reflection. Delays occur, old state. This subtle mental move keeps your attention loyal to the assumption of the wish fulfilled. With time, persistence turns this into habit, and habit shapes destiny. The beauty of persistence is that it transforms you along the way. The person who once begged for change becomes the one who calmly assumes it. The seeker becomes the possessor. Fulfillment is no longer something chased, but something lived, first in imagination, then in reality. And this is where Neville's entire teaching points. Life is not about reacting to Caesar's shadows, but about assuming, persisting, and resting in natural conviction. For once you master this, you don't just change circumstances, you change identity itself. And that's where the real story begins. So now the question is no longer whether imagination works, it's whether you will dare to use it. Will you keep reacting to shadows in the mirror, or will you choose to assume the state of your wish fulfilled and persist until it feels natural? The law is simple, but it demands courage, to think from the end instead of waiting for the end to come. Every desire you hold is already the seed of fulfillment. The birth depends only on your persistence, your conviction, your willingness to ignore the five senses and trust the inner world over the outer world of Caesar. Ask yourself, if it were already true, how would I feel right now? Live in that answer and the reflection must follow. And if these words stirred something in you, don't let it fade. Subscribe to this channel, turn on notifications, and stay with us. Because each video is designed to help you master this law, shift your identity, and finally create the reality you've always imagined.